Everyone ignored her, except one millionaire with a baby who stopped. She sat on the steps of the old post office, back pressed against the crumbling wall, arms wrapped around her knees like armor, eyes vacant. Her clothes were worn thin, not just from time but from the friction of being unseen. Hundreds passed her every day. Students with earbuds, professionals in suits, mothers hurrying children along. Some glanced, most didn't. But none stopped. They didn't see the bruises hidden under her sleeves. They didn't know the night before she had slept behind a dumpster. They didn't hear the silent scream in her mind, "Am I invisible?" People often assume desperation has a face, or that suffering is loud. But pain can be quiet. It can wear a smile to blend in. It can sit at your feet while you scroll on your phone. She wasn't asking for money. She wasn't begging. That's perhaps why they ignored her more. There's comfort in helping someone who asks, but what do you do with someone who doesn't? And then came a baby's cry. A gentle wail echoed across the plaza. A man, well-dressed, polished, paused with a stroller. The baby kept crying, and as he knelt to comfort the child, his eyes rose. That's when he saw her. He didn't see a homeless woman. He didn't see a liability, a burden, or a stain on the city's scenery. He saw a human. He reached into the stroller for a toy, but instead of giving it to his child, he walked toward her. He knelt down, met her eyes, and offered the toy. She looked at him, confused, cautious. He smiled. He wanted to share this with you. The baby giggled, completely unaware of the moment's gravity. It was the first time in months that someone had seen her, not as a problem to be solved, but as a soul to be acknowledged. He didn't leave after that. He sat with her, talked, asked her name, learned her story, and what she didn't know, what no one could have guessed, was that this man, this stranger with a baby, was one of the city's youngest self-made millionaires. But that wasn't the power that mattered most. What mattered was that he cared. In the weeks that followed, he connected her with resources, a shelter, therapy, a counselor. He offered her a job at one of his outreach foundations, not as a pity hire, but as someone with real potential. She bloomed, from forgotten to empowered, from invisible to inspiring. She now works with the very foundation that helped her, counseling others who feel unseen. She tells her story not for applause, but to teach. To remind us that being busy doesn't excuse us from being kind. To remind us that behind every ignored person is a story, a storm, a soul. And that perhaps the most powerful lesson came not from the man, but from the baby. That tiny voice, that innocent cry, pierced through a city's indifference and taught the most grown-up truth of all. Sometimes we need to stop rushing and start noticing, because when you choose to see someone, really see them, you don't just change their story. You change yours too. Kindness is a word we hear often, but few understand its quiet strength. In a world where crowds rush past pain and injustice, we are taught, often subconsciously, that value comes from numbers. That if many care, then someone is worth caring for. That if no one looks your way, then maybe you aren't worth noticing. But this belief is not just false, it's dangerous, because true kindness is not measured by how many people gather around a suffering soul. It's measured by whether one person will stop, see, and act, even when no one else does. Imagine a crowded street, dozens, maybe hundreds of people moving, all with their own schedules, their own problems, their own destinations. Amidst this stream of life, someone falls, figuratively or literally. A woman breaks down in tears at a bus stop. A boy stands by himself, bullied and humiliated. An elderly man struggles to carry a bag of groceries. How many times have we seen these scenes? And how often have we walked by, telling ourselves that someone else will help, that we are too busy, or that they might not want help, or that we simply don't know what to do? These excuses are comfortable. They shield us from the discomfort of responsibility, but the truth is simple and sobering. The crowd doesn't care. Kindness doesn't come from the masses. It comes from the one heart that chooses to see what everyone else ignores. It comes from the mother who notices the silent girl sitting alone, from the teenager who decides to sit with the boy no one eats lunch with, from the stranger who makes eye contact, offers a smile, or asks gently, "Are you okay?" One act, one person, that is the birthplace of kindness. We often think of kindness as something grand, donating millions, organizing food drives, building shelters, and yes, those things matter. But the core of kindness is deeply personal. It is found in the one person who dares to reach out in a moment when the world looks away. History and humanity have been changed not by the thunder of crowds, but by the whispers of conscience in a single individual's heart. Think about a time when you were struggling, really struggling. Maybe it wasn't public. Maybe no one saw your tears, your stress, your loneliness, but somehow someone noticed. A friend sent a text. A teacher asked if you needed to talk. A colleague made you tea without being asked. Did it fix everything? Maybe not. But didn't it remind you that you weren't invisible? Didn't it give you the strength to breathe again? Now think of someone who didn't get that moment. Think of someone who waited and watched the crowd pass them by. How many lives are silently crying out for one heart to see them? In classrooms, hospitals, shelters, city streets, and even our own homes, people are aching to be seen. Children act out not to annoy us but to get our attention. Teenagers grow quiet not because they're rude but because they're lost. Elderly people repeat their stories not because they forget, but because they hope someone still cares enough to listen. These are not distractions, they are invitations to be kind, and when someone accepts that invitation, the results can be profound. That one moment of kindness can alter a life's direction. A conversation can prevent a tragedy. A gesture can restore someone's dignity. A look of genuine care can remind a person that they are still human, still valued, still worthy of love. So never underestimate what it means to stop, to notice, to care. The crowd may never see that person on the street, that classmate in the back row, that colleague who has stopped smiling, but you can, and that's enough, because kindness doesn't require a stage or applause. It only requires a heart willing to see what others overlook. You may not change the world for everyone, but for someone you can change their world entirely, and that is what real kindness is. Not the noise of 1,000 hands clapping, but the silence of one heart reaching. It begins with one, and it can begin with you. Pain doesn't always scream. It doesn't always show up with bruises, bandages, or broken bones. Sometimes pain is wearing a smile. Sometimes it's sitting right next to you, laughing at a joke, showing up on time, performing well, even comforting others. And yet, inside it aches, it bleeds, it feels alone. That is the tragic beauty of invisible pain, hidden in plain sight, waiting to be noticed by someone who knows how to see beyond the surface. We live in a world where appearance is mistaken for truth. If someone looks clean, composed, and cheerful, we assume they're fine. We associate pain with drama, loud crying, or visible wounds. But the most dangerous kind of suffering is the one that hides behind masks. People become experts in concealment. They learn to say, "I'm fine," when they're breaking. They laugh so others don't ask questions. They go about their day because they're afraid of what might happen if they stop. We've all done it, haven't we? Walked past someone and assumed they were okay because they looked okay. Maybe you've done it with a friend, a classmate, a parent, or even a child. You saw no tears, no signs of distress, so you didn't ask. And yet, inside that person was a storm. Anxiety, grief, depression, trauma, fear. Pain that had no language, no space, no witness. This is why emotional intelligence is not just a luxury. It's a responsibility. The ability to read between the lines, to ask questions even when no one cries out, is a vital skill we must all develop. To truly support others, we have to slow down and pay attention. Listen with our hearts, not just our ears. Watch with empathy, not just our eyes. There's a story told in silence on every face. That girl in your office who never takes a break. Maybe she's afraid of going home to an abusive partner. That student who never speaks in class. Maybe he's battling depression and doesn't feel worthy of attention. That cashier who made a mistake with your change. Maybe she's been awake all night caring for a sick parent. The truth is, you never know what someone's going through unless you look closer, unless you ask with genuine care. Pain is not always visible, but it always leaves a mark. And sometimes the most harmful thing we can do is pretend it's not there. To walk by someone who is quietly drowning and assume they're swimming because they're not waving for help. But many people never learn to wave. They believe their pain is a burden, or they've learned the world doesn't care, and so they suffer quietly. We need to create a world where people don't have to collapse to be believed. Where someone doesn't have to have a breakdown in public to be taken seriously. A world where it's safe to speak your truth, even if it's invisible to others. This kind of world begins with how we treat each other every day. It begins with compassion in our conversations, patience in our assumptions, and kindness in our actions. When we begin to look beyond the surface, we start to notice things we missed before. The slight tremble in someone's voice. The long pause before someone says, "I'm okay." The way a person hesitates before joining a group or avoids eye contact. These are small clues, silent signals, invitations to care. And when we respond with warmth instead of dismissal, curiosity instead of judgment, we create connection. We create safety, and we offer someone the precious gift of being seen. Don't wait for a breakdown to offer a breakthrough. Don't wait for tears to be tender. Don't wait for someone to collapse before you choose to carry some of their weight. Be the one who sees what others overlook. Be the one who makes space for quiet pain. You don't need the perfect words or the right answers. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can say is, "I'm here. You don't have to go through this alone." Because when we choose to see pain that isn't obvious, we choose to love in a way that heals deeper than any medicine. We remind people that their suffering doesn't have to be loud to matter, and that even silent pain deserves to be heard, honored, and held with care. When we hear the word wealth, most people immediately think of money, big houses, luxury cars, designer clothes, overflowing bank accounts. That's the picture society paints. The wealthier you are, the more you own. But true wealth is not just about what you possess. It's about what you do with what you have. Real wealth isn't measured in dollars. It's measured in impact. It's not about how much you keep, it's about how much you give, how deeply you care, and how many lives you touch along the way. There are people with millions who are emotionally bankrupt, incapable of compassion, generosity, or presence. And then there are those with little who give everything they have to help someone else stand. That's the paradox. Having much doesn't guarantee you are rich. You are only as wealthy as the good you bring into the lives of others. The person who has the power to make someone's tomorrow better, and chooses to, is far wealthier than someone who builds walls with their fortune to keep the world out. It is easy to accumulate things. But the real challenge, the real calling, is to use your position, your platform, your influence, and your resources to lift others. Imagine a world where every person who had enough turned their gaze toward those who didn't. Where success wasn't defined by what we climb to achieve, but by whom we help rise. That is the kind of wealth that doesn't fade. That is the kind of wealth that echoes. Some people may not have money, but they have time. Some may not have time, but they have knowledge. Some may not have expertise, but they have compassion. Whatever you have that can be given, shared, or used to serve, that is your wealth. And when you offer it freely, not to impress but to empower, not for recognition but for restoration, you become a true giver. There's a powerful transformation that occurs when someone uses their wealth not as a mirror to admire themselves, but as a window to see those in need. A millionaire who feeds 1,000 people is more human than a billionaire who builds higher gates, and this truth extends beyond financial giving. There are emotional millionaires, those who are rich in empathy, in presence, in encouragement. They offer their support, their words, their belief in you when no one else does. That, too, is wealth. Sometimes one sincere "I believe in you" is more valuable than $1,000 check. To change lives doesn't always require vast fortune. It requires willingness. It takes the awareness to notice a need, the courage to respond, and the heart to care enough. Think of teachers who pour into students without ever being properly compensated. Think of mentors who take time out of their schedule to guide a lost soul. Think of strangers who step in at the right moment, changing the trajectory of someone's story with a simple act of kindness. The richest people in the world are not always listed in magazines. Some of them live quietly, unnoticed, using what they have to lift someone from hopelessness. And every time they do, they invest in something far more valuable than stocks or real estate. They invest in humanity. If you are blessed with something, money, talent, position, knowledge, then you are holding a key to someone else's prison. The question is, will you use it? Will you unlock the doors others walk past? Will you stop seeing wealth as personal gain and start seeing it as shared responsibility? This world is desperate for those who understand that fortune is not found in what you store, but in what you spread. The greatest legacy you can leave is not your name engraved in stone, but your love engraved in someone's life. So whatever your wealth is, be it financial, emotional, intellectual, or spiritual, ask yourself this: how can I use this to help someone else breathe easier? To stand taller, to believe again, because when your success becomes someone else's survival, when your resources become someone's rescue, you are no longer just wealthy, you are powerful, and you are exactly what this world needs. There's something extraordinary about the cry of a child. It's raw, unfiltered, and painfully honest. It pierces through the noise of adult life, bypassing logic and ego, and strikes something deeper, something instinctive. It's a sound that doesn't ask for permission to be heard. It simply is, and in its simplicity, it reminds us of truths we've forgotten. It wakes the part of us that has gone numb from routine, hardened by responsibility, and distracted by ambition. It reminds us of what matters most, the human need to be seen, heard, and comforted. As adults, we often believe we are the teachers and children are the students. We teach them how to speak, how to walk, how to behave. But in moments of innocence, when a child cries or reaches or laughs without shame, something remarkable happens. We become the students, because children still live in emotional honesty. They still react from the heart. They don't hide behind pride. When they hurt, they express it. When they need, they ask. And when they love with abandon. The cry of a child can awaken something buried within us, a wisdom we've traded for busyness, a sensitivity we lost somewhere between growing up and growing cold. In the cry of a child, we are reminded of our own humanity, of how fragile we are, of how we, too, once cried for comfort, for protection, for connection, and even now, as adults, that child within us hasn't gone away. It's still there, quietly longing to be seen and heard, just in more subtle, complicated ways. Sometimes we forget how to feel until a child reminds us. Their vulnerability challenges our walls, their need demands our attention. And in responding to that need, we rediscover what it means to be present, to care without condition, to give without expecting anything in return. We remember that love isn't always grand gestures. It can be holding someone, listening, offering comfort. Things a child asks for naturally, and we, as adults, have learned to neglect. A child's cry is a mirror. It shows us who we are not just as caregivers, but as human beings. It reveals whether we are still in touch with our capacity for compassion. It challenges the part of us that has become too busy, too self-important, or too distracted to notice the small, soft cries around us, not just from children, but from those who don't know how to cry aloud anymore. We live in a time where emotional expression is often suppressed. We are taught to stay strong, stay composed, and push through. But what if strength also meant softness? What if wisdom wasn't just found in silence and stoicism, but in responsiveness and empathy? There are moments when the cry of a child can break through the hardened shell of adulthood and invite us to become fully alive again, to pause, to kneel, to listen, not just with our ears, but with our whole being. And in doing so, we are reminded that compassion is not weakness, it is strength in its purest form. In one simple cry, a child can disrupt a boardroom, pause a crowded street, soften the heart of a stranger, and even stop a millionaire in his tracks. That sound, though small, can carry the power to shift a moment, a mindset, a life. It's easy to overlook that power. But if we allow ourselves to pay attention, not just to the cry itself, but to what it represents, we start to understand something sacred, that all of us are born with a capacity to feel, to respond, to nurture. And when that part of us wakes up, we begin to see the world differently. We begin to notice those who need us, not just children, but everyone who longs for someone to care. So the next time you hear a cry, not just from a child, but from anyone brave enough to show their need, don't turn away. Let it wake something in you. Let it remind you of what you are made for, not to ignore pain, but to respond to it with love, because in every honest cry lies a chance for someone to remember who they are, and for someone else to become who they were meant to be. Sometimes the people closest to us stop seeing us clearly. They grow used to our presence, our silence, our struggle. They normalize our pain. They assume we're fine because we've managed so far. They pass by us daily and forget to ask the deeper questions. How are you really? What do you need? Who are you becoming? And over time, we begin to believe what we see reflected in their eyes, that we are ordinary, invisible, unremarkable. Slowly, painfully, we forget our own worth, but then, one day, someone unexpected crosses our path, a stranger, someone with no history of who we were, no lens of familiarity to dull their vision. They see us not as a role we've played, mother, worker, caretaker, student, but as a whole human being. They notice things others don't, the weight behind our smile, the hesitation in our eyes, the quiet brilliance we've long tucked away. And in that moment, something powerful happens. We feel seen, not for what we've done, but for who we are. And it begins to awaken something inside us that had been asleep for too long. This is the mystery and gift of being noticed by a stranger. They don't carry the baggage of expectations. They don't compare us to who we used to be. They meet us in the now, and in doing so, they sometimes reflect back a beauty, a strength, or a purpose we had forgotten we carried. It's not always dramatic. Sometimes it's a small word of encouragement, a question asked with real curiosity, a compliment given without agenda, a moment of attention so pure, it feels like sunlight cracking through a long, dark room, and we begin to remember that we are more than the failures we rehearse in our minds, that we are more than the roles we've been forced to perform, that beneath the exhaustion, the disappointments, the heartbreaks, we are still alive, still capable, still worthy. Many of us walk through life thinking we need permission to feel valuable. We wait for someone we love to validate us. We hope our effort will be seen, our pain acknowledged, our dreams taken seriously. But often, the people around us are so consumed by their own struggles that they don't know how to hold space for ours. They don't mean to be blind, they've just forgotten how to look closely. And so when a stranger notices, it can feel like a miracle. Not because they do something grand, but because they offer what so many have withheld, their attention, their presence, their belief. Think of the woman everyone ignored until one day a man, unknown to her, unrelated, unconnected, stopped and saw her not as someone to avoid but as someone worth noticing. He saw past her clothes, her circumstance, her silence. He didn't see a stranger, he saw a story, and by simply stopping, by offering kindness without judgment, he reignited something the world had extinguished in her, hope. Sometimes it's not about saving someone, it's about seeing them, reminding them they are not invisible, and in that reminder they start to save themselves. You never know what someone is carrying behind their quiet eyes. You never know whose self-worth is hanging by a thread, and you never know when you might be the stranger who sees what everyone else has missed. Your words might be the first kind ones they've heard in weeks. Your presence might be the reason they choose not to give up. Your belief might be the beginning of their healing, so don't underestimate your power. Don't walk past people as if they are background characters in your story. Every person you meet is living a life as complex, painful, and beautiful as your own. And sometimes, your smallest gesture of kindness can echo in their hearts forever, because in a world full of people who have grown blind to each other's value, be the one who sees clearly. You never know whose light you might help reignite. And one day, someone may look back and say, it wasn't a friend or family or therapist who saw me first. It was a stranger, and that changed everything. We grow up with ideas about what love should look like. We picture it as grand gestures, perfect timing, familiar faces, and predictable roles. We expect it to come from those closest to us: family, friends, partners. We imagine that love will arrive dressed in comfort and convenience, someone we already know, someone who already knows us. But life has a different rhythm. Love doesn't always walk in the way we planned. Sometimes it enters quietly, through a door we weren't watching, wearing a disguise we almost missed. And when it does, it changes everything. Not because it fits our expectations, but because it meets our deepest need. It's a humbling thing to realize that love is not always wrapped in the familiar. Sometimes it shows up in a stranger who pauses when everyone else rushes past. In a child's laughter that breaks your grief open and floods it with light. In a moment of unexpected kindness from someone who owes you nothing but gives you everything they can. Love, in its purest form, doesn't arrive to impress, it arrives to heal. That's the kind of love that changes lives. The love that doesn't ask for credentials, history, or guarantees. The love that isn't delayed by fear or restrained by logic. It simply moves instinctively toward pain. It recognizes where it's needed, even if it's not invited, and it stays, not because it's required, but because it chooses to. When you've been neglected, overlooked, or misunderstood, love can become something you stop expecting. You grow used to being invisible, you lower your standards for connection, you stop hoping, but love has a way of finding the cracks, of pouring itself into the spaces where light has long been absent. It doesn't always come from the people you thought would care. It doesn't always follow the path you mapped out. Sometimes it breaks every rule you wrote in your heart, but when it arrives, genuine, unfiltered, unearned, you feel something inside you begin to soften, begin to breathe again. There are moments when love looks like a millionaire stepping out of his world and into the life of someone he's never met, not because he had to, but because something within him said, stop, see, care. And maybe that person didn't need money as much as they needed dignity. Maybe what they lacked wasn't comfort, but confirmation that they mattered, and love, through him, delivered that. It's in those moments that we realize love isn't always emotional, it's deeply practical. It shows up as someone holding your hand while you cry, someone sitting with you in silence when there are no words, someone watching your child when you can't keep your eyes open another second, someone saying, you don't have to go through this alone, and meaning it. These acts may not look romantic, but they are sacred. Love is not limited by form. It is only limited by our willingness to see it. We miss it sometimes because it doesn't look like what we were waiting for. We wanted perfection, but it came as presence. We wanted poetry, but it came as someone doing the dishes. We wanted rescue, but it came as resilience. And if we're not careful, we'll walk right past the love we need because it doesn't come with fanfare. But real love rarely does. It arrives quietly, intentionally, and stays long after the applause would have faded. The most beautiful love stories are not always romantic. They are redemptive. They tell of moments when someone saw another person's brokenness, and instead of turning away, they leaned in. They stood beside them. They offered love not as a reward, but as a right. Because being human means we are all worthy of love, even at our worst, even in our lowest place. So open your eyes to the love that surrounds you in unexpected forms. Don't overlook the kindness of strangers, the compassion of children, the patience of someone who listens without judgment. Don't wait for love to arrive the way you imagined it. Receive it in the way life offers it, because when love comes, not in the form you expected, but in the exact moment you needed it most, you'll understand. It was never about how it arrived. It was about what it awakened in you, and what it reminded you you've always deserved.